So right now I'd like to show you the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula, we can derive it using a technique called completing the square. If I have time at the end, I'll show you. Right now though, we're just going to take a look at it and see how we're going to use it. So this is what it looks like. So x is the solution we're looking for. X equals negative b, or maybe the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2a. Okay? Where, right, this is where we figure out what a, b, and c are. So this is just a generic quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So we need to have our quadratic equation in standard form before we can use the quadratic formula and then pick off a, b, and c. Okay? So some things that I want to point out. First off, that first term, right, that negative b, this means we're going to change the sign of b. Underneath the radical, that b squared is always positive, right, because we're squaring it. So even if b is a negative number, if you square it, if you square it correctly at least, you should get a positive number out. That minus 4ac, right, if a or c is negative, then when we multiply, because it's a minus 4 times that, then we actually end up adding the 4ac to the b squared. Okay. And then finally, this 2a is under both the negative b and the radical term. Okay, so make sure you get everything in the top calculated first, and then 2 times a goes in the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice, and we're going to start by making sure that we're in the right form. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And then we're going to identify a, b, and c. Okay, so here's our first one. 2x squared plus 3x minus 7 equals 0. So we're all set up. X squared first, then x, then constant equals 0. So a equals, and b equals, and c equals. Okay, so a equals 2. B, right, b is our x coefficient, so that's 3. And c is the constant term, negative 7. Cool. So here we go. X equals negative b. So write the opposite of 3. So negative 3 right now is positive, so the opposite of that is negative 3. Plus or minus square root, and I made it big, right, because there's a lot of stuff that goes under here. So I have b squared, so 3 squared minus 4, and I'm just going to use parentheses for my times. 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 7. And then that is all divided by 2 times a, which is 2. Okay. So what are we going to get? X equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root. So b squared, so 3 squared is 9. Now here's where I have my c was negative, so when it multiplies the negative 4, I'm actually going to add that last term. So plus, I have 4 times 2 times 7, is that 8 times 7, so plus 56. And then 2 times 2 is 4. I'll pop up right here. So x is negative 3 plus or minus square root. What do we have there? 9 plus 56. Is 65, all divided by 4. Now, just a quick look, 65 does not have any perfect square factors, so I'm just going to leave it there. There are 2 solutions hiding in there, negative 3 plus square root 65 all over 4, negative 3 minus square root 65 all over 4. Okay, so there we go. That's how it works. Notice, right, when your solution like this is kind of not nice. It has this irrational term here, the square root of 65. That means we were not going to find a factoring way to solve that. Right? We were not going to find some, oh, well, look, I should have just factored this or right, done something easy. Quadratic formula, I mean, really is the only way to go about that one. Okay, let's try the next one. 4x squared minus x minus 3 equals 0. So we're in a good form. So A, B, and C. All right, I'm across the top here, give myself some more room. So A is, right, the x squared coefficient for, what's B? What are we going to write down for B? Right, -1, right? And then C is -3. So quadratic formula, A equals -B. So B is right now -1, so I need the opposite of that. So 1, positive now. Right, our B started off negative, so in our formula, I change its sign to start with. So 1 plus or minus square root B squared. It's a -1 squared, so -1, you can put it in parentheses, right, to make sure that you're careful. Or probably what I would suggest and what I'm going to start doing after this one, I'm just going to write down my B squared there. I'm not going to put it in the parentheses with the squared. I'm just going to do that mentally and then write it down. Okay. So B squared minus 4 times A, which is 4, times C, which is -3, all divided by 2 times A. So 2 times 4. So what are we going to get? 1 plus or minus square root. Let's see how much of that math we can just do in our heads. Can we do that entire radical? So I've got a 1. I guess not. We'll do it in 2 steps. So 1 plus. Why is it plus? Right? Because I have -4 and then, right, this -3 when it's like I'm subtracting off this negative number, so it'll be a plus. I have 16 times 3 is 48. And then 2 times 4 is 8. So we're at 1 plus or minus the square root of 49, right? So inside the radical, tidy that up, over 8, square root of 49. Well, that's a nice one. So 1 plus or minus 7, all divided by 8. So then, right, we do 1 for the plus and 1 for the minus. So 1 plus 7 is 8 over 8. So there's one solution, x equals 1. When I want the plus route, the negative route, so 1 minus 7 is -6 over 8. And that's our second solution. Let's go ahead and reduce that. What is that? -3/4. There we go. Now, when your solution turns out to be one of these, if you get rational numbers for your solutions, so 1 is rational, -3/4 rational numbers, kind of nice. That means we could have solved that original one by factoring. Didn't have to, quadratic formula worked. It just would have been an option. Okay, let's do some more. And if you want to pause, right, and see how well you do on your own, I would strongly recommend that, and then come on back. Okay, here we go. A is 1, B is 4, C is -12. So x equals -b, so -4 plus or minus square root. So b squared, so 4 squared, that's going to be a 16. Minus 4 times a is 1. I'm not going to write that. I'm starting to peel back some steps, not writing them all down. 4ac, c is -12. All over 2 times a is 1. Okay, so what are we going to get? -4 plus or minus square root 16 again, negative plus 48 over 2. So -4 plus or minus square root 16 plus 48, 64. Okay. All over 2. So 64, that's a nice one. -4 plus or minus 8 over 2. So what we're going to go ahead and split this apart into the two solutions, right? So -4 plus 8. -4 plus 8 is 4 over 2. So that's 2 for one solution. And -4 minus 8, -12 over 2. There's a different solution. Okay. Again, you can check, right? How do we check? We take the 2 or we take the -6 and we plug it back into the original. Make sure we get a true statement. Okay. Being careful, especially when you plug in a -6 for the x squared, that you're going to get a positive 36 out there. Okay. Oh gosh, I have x times the quantity, x plus 5 equals 7x plus 1. This is not at all in standard form. In fact, it's decidedly not in standard form. So how are we going to get from here to where we need to be? Right. Get rid of the parentheses. Get a 0 on one side. So let's distribute the x. Then we'll do some subtracting. So x squared plus 5x equals 7x plus 1. So there's the distribute. I need a 0, right? So I'm going to choose the right side. You don't have to. I do, just because it makes me feel better. So subtract 7x from both sides, subtract 1 from both sides. Where do we get? X squared minus 2x minus 1 equals 0. I didn't leave myself very much room to do that one. Sorry about that. So what are we going to get? So I'm going to make sure I'm still on screen here. So ABC, so x equals 2 plus or minus square root. Negative 2 squared is still positive 4 minus 4 times a times a negative 1 all over 2. I keep doing that minus a negative. Hopefully we'll have one that it doesn't do that here in a second. So what do I get? 2 plus or minus square root. I have 4 plus 4 is 8 over 2. Now, this is an okay answer. I'm going to go ahead and circle it because that is okay. Now, if you have an online homework system, it might not take that because this square root of 8 actually simplifies. And once it simplifies, then you can also reduce. I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and pop down here to the bottom because I think that's going to need more space than I have. And let me show you how that one can possibly simplify. So I have 2 plus or minus the square root of 8 all over 2. And I want to show you because students will sometimes try to just reduce these 2's here. And why is that not okay? Right? Think about why I can't just get rid of these 2's here. Right? When we reduce, what we're doing is we're canceling the common factor. It's like we're factoring the 2 out of the top, and then we get to reduce it because you have a 2 on the top and a 2 on the bottom, and they're factors, so that's a 1. I don't have that here, so but I can make it be here because this square root of 8 is really 2 square roots of 2 all over 2, right? So my square root of 8 I've rewritten as 2 times the square root of 2. Now I have a 2 down at the bottom, a 2 out in front, and a 2 in front of the radical. When you have a factor, a common factor in all 3 of those places, then you can reduce. Leave behind a 1 out in front. Okay, so you could write that as 1 plus or minus the square root of 2. That's the simplest way to write that. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit more background. So one more step back because I know this can be kind of confusing. So let's go back to this 2. Let's go back to our original. So 2 plus or minus the square root of 8 all over 2. Okay. So the other way you can think about this is you can split this fraction apart into 2 fractions, one for each of the terms in the numerator, and then that 2 stays in the bottom. So 2 over 2 plus or minus the square root of 8 over 2. Totally okay, nothing illegal, perfectly fine answer. Okay. 2 over 2, that is 1. Okay. So 1 plus or minus square root 8 over 2. Perfectly fine answer. Okay. And now we could do the simplify the square root 8 part. So 1 plus or minus 2 square roots of 2 over 2. And cancel the 2's there. 1 plus or minus the square root of 2. It's a little bit more, if you can get around the splitting apart the fraction part, this one will keep you from doing something that you're not supposed to. And you can maybe convince yourself of this first step, splitting it apart, if you see that, oh, I could get back because I'm adding 2 fractions with the same denominator. Okay, it's just more, it's not as common to split it apart as it is to put them back together. Okay, better, fine answer, better answer. Okay, here we go. Last one. Last 2. Let's see, A is 3, B is 1, C is 6. X equals -1 plus or minus square root B squared minus 4 times 3 times 6. 4 times A being played by 3 times 6, C, right? All over 2A. -1 plus or minus square root. Oh dear, what am I going to get there? 1 minus 72 all over 6. Okay. X equals -1 plus or minus square root of -71 over 6. Well, that's obnoxious. What do we do about negative numbers under radicals? Right. So we say, oh yeah, that's right. Square root of -1 is I. So we could write that, and we should write that as -1 plus or minus, and I'm going to put the I in front here just so that it doesn't try to sneak under, I times the square root of 71, which doesn't get any simpler, all over 6. Okay, it's an answer. It's a great answer. Okay. This last one, it doesn't have a constant term. So what would we do if we don't have a constant term? Right, we can still pick off A and B. What would we write for C if there isn't something written there? Yeah, it's just a 0. It's an okay thing. Well, let's go to the plug-in part. So X equals -B plus or minus square root B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. Okay, I'm just plugging in as I go. X equals -7 plus or minus square root. Here we go. 49. Oh, let's do that last part. 4 times 6 times 0. When you multiply by 0, right? Zeroes out that whole last part, right? That's all a 0. So I just have the square root of 49. And then it's a 12 in the bottom. So I'll erase my radical there so I can have a little bit more room. So square root of 49, that's actually nice because that's a nice, pretty number. So -7 plus or minus 7 all over 12. So I do my arrows here, one for the plus and one for the minus. So -7 plus 7, 0, right? 0 over 12. 0 in the numerator of a fraction is 0. So there's one answer. And then go the bottom route, right? The minus, -7 minus 7. That's -14 over 12. And then reduce that. So -7/6. And there is the other answer. Okay, I hope that helps.